Hey everyone, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5600X from AMD. Now I know other reviewers have gone live with reviews a little bit beforehand, but I got the 5900X and the 5950X as my first two CPUs because in the UK we got sent them in pairs. So I got those two early, then I got the 5600X and the 5800X on the day of launch. So I basically worked through the night to make sure I could get you this one done because this was the one after those two I was most interested in. Comes in at £300, 6 cores and 12 threads. Now I've done an awful lot of overclocking on this, and one of the things I will tell you right now before we break off is 4.8 gigahertz all core. Okay then, so the little 280 stroke 280 pound stroke $299 6 core 12 thread processor. Now, fully loaded up, I noticed that I was getting around 4.25 gigahertz. Now I do have a meaty cooler, an excessive cooler for most, but it's because we like to try and keep things fair. Now, so all loaded up at stock, it was sort of like early 60 degrees, really wasn't being stressed at all, like not at all. Now, if you wanted to run this at stock, now this is the stock cooler that it comes with, it's a very basic unit, it's going to be up in the 70s and it's going to make quite a bit of noise. I personally would say if you're buying this processor, then this is kind of get it running spare cooler kind of territory, or if you're on a horrific budget and you don't mind a bit of noise. I think for the most of you out there, enthusiast based, getting yourself a semi-decent 120mm based air cooler for around £40 will be amazing. Still not going to be able to allow you mind-bending overclocks, but it should be able to allow you to do the Precision Boost Overdrive. Now you can do Precision Boost Overdrive in the AMD software, but I always do it in the BIOS. And you can go and enable Precision Boost Overdrive, and then you can do an offset clock. I think they're all going to do the 200 megahertz offset clock without a problem. And I think that with a decent 120mm cooler for around that £40–50 mark, you're going to be able to keep that cool and relatively quiet as well. So that's my little kind of thing for those of you out there that are going to be trying to do it on a budget but still want to get a decent experience. If, however, you're looking to have spanking big overclocks or ridiculously low temperatures, a 240mm AIO will do you well. I managed to do my monstrous overclock on this. Yes, I was running a 360mm AIO, but the fans were about 1200 RPM and they go up to 3000 RPM, and that's kind of what I needed to keep the 5950X in check. So it actually ran ridiculously low RPMs, but really, really cool as well. So with it about 1200 RPM, we were actually looking mid, sort of like low 70s, sorry. But I could turn it back to 600 RPM and get about 75 degrees. They were nigh on not running. So with a 240 AIO, maybe you've already got one, maybe you can get one second hand. It's going to depend. Prices have been coming down, but you'll do epically well with something like this. It will also respond in roughly the similar kind of way if you had an NHD 15 on it, for example, one of the big twin tower coolers. So that's something for you to keep in mind when I break onto the overclocks in a minute. Power draw wise, with this, to be fair, it hardly uses any. And that's one of the reasons why the temps were so good. So at stock it was 120 watts. That's for the entire system. This entire system. So it did, and that's what I mean. That was the power it was pulling from the wall, 120 watts. And that was fully loaded with OCCT as well. So it wasn't like I was doing a pathetic test. I had all of the cores being spanked for that. So it genuinely did incredibly well. Now, what you've already seen there is the fact that I did PBO tests and manual overclock tests. And you're right to be shouting at the screen, wondering what overclocks I got. So with Precision Boost Overdrive, literally go into the BIOS, enable Precision Boost Overdrive, add the 200 megahertz. That was all I did other than enable DOCP. And I run 3600 megahertz memory with a one-to-one tie-in with the fabric clock, as AMD have requested. So that was all lovely. Then for the manual overclock, this is where it gets a bit complicated because I actually noticed that the processor was pulling about 1.2, 1.225 volts when fully loaded, but at like 4.2 gigahertz. So what I actually did is I started my overclock journey at 1.2 volts, but I put it at 4.4 gigahertz, passed test. Did it 4.5, passed. 4.6, passed. 4.7 at 1.2 volts, passed. So at this point, I'm thinking at 1.2 volts, it's actually achieved the same overclock as the 5900X and the 5950X. So I'm already astounded at this point, and with incredibly good temperatures. Still with all the fans on standard, hardly doing anything, really impressed. And then at that point, I got a little bit cocky. So I put it up to 4.8 gigahertz, which is a full 100 megahertz above these. And it didn't pass, which I was a bit sad about. So I put the volts up to 1.25 volts, and it was shaky. So I then notched them up a little bit. It was 1.256 volts, 1.2565, I believe, if I was to go down all the decimals. And then it passed everything, 100% stable, 4.8 gigahertz. Now, from this moment out, I could have, and possibly should have, pushed even more. But at the end of the day, at that point, I looked around to see what some of the other reviewers had been getting. Now, I already think this is a great chip. I think I've kind of won the silicon lottery because some other people were saying 4.6 and 4.7 at over 1.3 volts. So I'm going to assume that I am lucky. But it gives you the idea that these processors are out there. And it also gives you the idea that the CPUs aren't cherry-picked for reviewers because we've all got a range of them as well. So where I was at 4.8, I think there's more in this if I was to crank all the fans and everything up. But then that gets to the point where it's not particularly going to be indicative, you know what I mean, about the experience you guys are going to be getting at home. Because I don't see why you're going to spend £300 on a processor and then you're going to spend £160, £180 on a cooler. So, and then I would be running that cooler within an absolute, you know, I would be screaming it. So I stopped there because I didn't want to kill it. But I'm probably going to go back and cover it again for a best case scenario if you win the silicon lottery and have all this kit kind of around. Just kind of research so that we know the numbers. But at the time of doing this review, I know I've got 3 days until the next batch of stuff arrives because I'm under NDA and I'm not allowed to say what it is. So time may be a bit short. So 4.8 gigahertz, 1.2565 something volts, just over 1.25 volts basically. It was literally in the BIOS 1.25 and then I pressed plus twice. 100% stable. With this hardly running the fans, it was actually really nice. It's the quietest I've been doing benchmark testing for the last week or so because these have all needed loads and loads of cooling. But at the end of the day, the thing to take away from here is at 1.2 volts, it was stable at 4.7. And you can hear that I needed to go over half a volt up to be able to get 4.8 stable. But even if you did get 4.7 stable, that kind of matches these. I would also say if you're going to start your overclock journey at home with a 5600X, start at 1.2 volts and then literally pick a clock speed. I would personally say start at 4.4, all core, fixed, and then work your way up. Doing benchmarks in between. Please make sure you do benchmarks in between. So you're going to need to do a stability test like Prime or OCCT, then also do benchmark tests as well. A simple, quick one will be Cinebench 20. Run them both and then keep a screenshot for each one. That's what I do because you might notice that scores start to go off because you can fiddle with them too much and start to ruin things. So keep an eye on them and make sure the scores don't go down. Keep an eye on your temperatures, keep screenshots because that's really handy for you to go back to. The other thing to keep in mind are the volts. If you are manually setting the volts, on the Crosshair Hero that I have here, there are 5 settings for the load line calibration. I had it on 5, which is the highest one, and it did keep it pretty much exactly where I wanted it. No droops, no boost. That's my personal preference of being perfect. Leave the volts where I want them, and it's actually really refreshing to be able to do something like this on AMD and things not move around. So I was really happy. So there's a lot there for you to kind of keep in mind. Also, sometimes you don't necessarily need to turn the volts up. There are power settings in the BIOS where you can increase the amps. So you get 100%. I was testing this on 120% power, so it was allowing more power to go in. It doesn't force it in, it's only when it's needed, when it's taken. And I think that's one of the reasons why I managed to get things running so well at such a low clock, because I did fiddle around a fair bit in the BIOS. Well, not a fair bit, because at the end of the day it was only turning the power limit up, turning the voltage up, setting the load line calibration, and then setting the core count, and then enabling DOCP. Pretty basic things in reality. If you're not used to the BIOS, scary. But if you've been overclocking for a little while, or you've done stuff with AMD in the past, not particularly that scary. And if you ever do get worried or something goes wrong, there's a BIOS clear button on every board. You can literally turn it off, clear the BIOS, and start again. So, enough edumacation. Now we're going to move on to gaming. Now, at this point, I'm going to show you the all gaming graph. And I'm going to give you some balance, because there were some people before that didn't like the fact that my results with some of the games put the 10900K a frame in front. Well, I can't help that. That's the numbers that the rig spat out. And the other thing that a lot of you don't realise is AMD see the reviews before you guys do, and they weren't worried and thought it was all in line. So at that point, I become happy, and I know there are a lot of you out there who are very enthusiastic and want to be very defensive of AMD, which is amazing and great, but then blaming reviewers, that's kind of not great. The numbers are the numbers, they get spat out, you guys get them, and I would like this to be even more in front rather than behind, if anything, but they're not. But I give them to you as they come. So at this point, you can see that the 5600 Precision Boost Overdrive actually did better than my manual overclock, which was annoying, but it did, and it's there, and that's at the top. But one of the things I will say though is look how far down the 10600K it is, and that's kind of the competition with Intel on this. 6 cores, 12 threads, or was it just 6 fixed? I can't remember now off the top of my head, and I'm going to have a brain fart because of it. But it's the 10600K, it's the i5. Anyway, so then when we split it out, this is the ones that the Intel people will like, the AMD fanboys hate, and you see that the 10900K is at the top. That's Far Cry 5. It was the same with one of the other games that we did, but one that I did notice was Total Warhammer, which is a very, very CPU intensive game. It's the reason why we run it, because we picked our benches to kind of show off different specific parts of the CPU. So with a game, a CPU really, you want to put it in 1080p, because if you put it in 1080p, it's going to help stretch the frames out as much. A lot of games will be CPU limited at 1080p, and Warhammer is very, very CPU intensive. And Warhammer absolutely loved the Precision Boost Overdrive clock that I said to you about. The overclock did really well, but the 5600X actually sat there really closely at stock with the 5950X and the 5900X. So at this point, we already know that Warhammer doesn't particularly like cores, or at least it's not responding massively better to lots of cores, but it does like clocks. But then if you keep going down, you can actually see the fact that the 5950X and the 5900X overclock are below, because with doing that, what we're effectively doing is lowering the maximum clock speed, but making them run on all cores, so that all makes a lot of sense. But then just a bit below that, you can see the 10600K as well, which is actually fairly down the bottom of the graph. Now, these were all tested in the last week, and we've done this so that we can extract minimum results from our data. And we will be going back and doing a little bit more. So gaming, it did very well. It's up there or thereabouts with Intel on some games, and it actually does a little bit better in others. Exactly how AMD would expect. But the other thing to kind of pull from that is the 5600 did well. The 5600 overclock did okay, but the Precision Boost Overdrive, just enabling that really simple thing for gaming, was the best way to get the most from the 5600X. And it's a couple of settings, it's really simple, and to be fair, I think it's something that every single one of you at home should be doing to these processors, even if you're not going to overclock or do anything else. I think if you're going in the BIOS to enable your DOCP or XMP, whatever you want to call it, to get the memory timings and everything set up, it's just one click. I think you deserve to be doing the Precision Boost Overdrive as well. It's at this point, though, that we then move on to stressing the CPU out that little bit more. It's productivity. Now, it's only 6 cores and 12 threads, remember? These are the big daddy ones, cost lots and lots more money. And it's at this point that I actually think that the AMD processor, even compared to the i5 from Intel, actually starts to really pull in front. So with Blender, this is our own custom Blender, 4 million polygons. A 1080p run took 8.5 minutes, basically. So that's a fairly long amount. And then you can see that we've got the 4K run taking over 30 minutes. So that shows you how long I have to test for, because just these 3 runs took, or just the 3 4K runs, taken over an hour and a half. So when you multiply that out to all the other benchmarks, you'll understand why things take a while. But the long and short of it is, the stock 5600X was 30 seconds faster than the i5. And then when we get in 1080p, and then when we go to 4K, it was almost a minute and a half. So productivity on this, it really, really is quite strong. And that was then mirrored with Sony Vegas. Now, I personally use Sony Vegas to make videos, and I know Sony Vegas does like clock speeds. But if you see here where the i5 is, fairly low to the bottom of the graph, and then you go to where all of the others are, you can see that it did really well. Now, the manual overclock it did do better than the Precision Boost Overdrive, and that will be because we will have had more cores running at a higher clock speed, rather than the Precision Boost Overdrive just offsetting them by 200 megahertz. So it's slightly different to the gaming in this regard. So it's about 30 seconds. So with Vegas, for example, and Blender, a manual overclock is going to be stronger. So you just need to pick which way that you want to swing with your focus for setting the system up if you're going to be looking to get the best from it. Gaming, Precision Boost Overdrive. Anything that involves lots of cores, manual overclock, fix all the cores, that sort of thing. Cinebench was the same kind of thing. Intel was much below. And then there are some other ones which you can go and see on the OC3D website, because it's like 26 pages. There's oodles and oodles and oodles of results there. You can take longer to pick apart the results, and you're not going to have me talking over your ears in the background. Now, the 5600X. Let's keep in mind, the 5900X, I actually gave the, remember Tom, Performance Award. This one, I gave the Enthusiast Award. It might have been the other way around, actually. I think it was the other way around. I think this was Performance, this was Enthusiast. This one, however, is a little cracker. This is the gamer's choice, because if you're going to be playing games and you're not going to be doing an awful lot of multi-threaded kind of 3D modeling or video rendering or anything like that, this is the one for you. This is the one for predominantly gaming. But as you've seen, compared to the i5 on Intel, when you do mix in a bit of video encoding, some video rendering, 3D modeling, maybe doing stuff for building a patch, or different models for a game that you're playing, this is still incredibly capable and is significantly quicker than the Intel counterpart. So this one is a little cracker, and I'm really glad of that, because this one was the one I was hoping was going to be amazing, which is why I jumped on it and went at it straight away. With my overclock results, I do think I've got lucky, but I have said to you, start at 1.2 volts fixed and then work your clock up until you find some instability. Keep an eye on your temperatures. This little processor will do you really, really well if you set everything up correctly. Power, adding that power percentage that you allow extra power to go in is just important as voltage, and it will do really, really well with a decent cooler on it. This, as I have said, but I just do want to reiterate, great for a first setup, for a first boot to make sure everything's running okay. Great for an emergency cooler as well at stock. If you are going to be doing Precision Boost Overdrive, or you're looking to push things a little bit further, treat yourself to a decent cooler. Air will do you well. AIOs will allow you to have your system set up quieter. Now, some of you out there don't care about noise. I personally do. So I think it's worth investing. Christmas is coming. Wives, girlfriends, mums, dads, aunties, uncles, ask them to get you a decent cooler. Club in to get you a decent cooler. There's lots of options for you. Just think outside the box. It will serve you really, really well. Deep breaths. Now, it's a Saturday and it's just gone past lunchtime. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this video edited for you because I want to get it live for you as quickly as possible, because if I'm completely honest, I need to get out in the sunshine that I've been looking outside at for the last week while I've been testing this lot, and I really do need to go for a walk and get some headspace. But for now at least, this is the tiniest one. I know some of you have already switched off, but if you haven't switched off, thank you for watching. Click like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that sort of stuff. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. Come join the madness. Things are going to be getting a bit mad as well because I have a few things up my sleeve. But for now at least, this is the tiniest one with another review for you out. Ding! Love you, sis.